Someone in your life right now is being kind to you, and you have no idea whether it is real. That is not paranoia. That is psychology. Because kindness is the most effective mask manipulation has ever found. Not aggression, not deception, not cruelty. Kindness. The mechanics, the psychology, the specific behaviors, so that you will never look at an act of generosity the same way. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how it works, and you will never be fooled the same way again. 3 forms, 3 different mechanisms. By the end of this video, you will know how to identify all of them. Not their kindness, their technique. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most people experiencing this right now have no idea. Stay until the end. The third type of weaponized kindness is happening to most people right now. Almost no one recognizes it while it is happening. But once you know what to look for, you will see it everywhere. And in this video, I will show you how to take it off. That is all I needed you to understand. Let us begin. Introduction. There is a sentence that most people believe without ever examining it. The sentence is this: kindness is always good. It sounds obvious. It sounds inarguable. And for most of human history, it has been treated as one of those moral axioms, something so fundamental that questioning it would seem like madness. But dark psychology asks a different question. Not whether kindness is good in itself, but whether kindness, as a behavior, can be deployed strategically. Whether it can be offered not as a genuine expression of care, but as a tool, precise, calculated, and aimed at a specific outcome that has nothing to do with the well-being of the person receiving it. And the answer, documented extensively in psychological research and observable in everyday human behavior, is yes. Kindness can be weaponized. And when it is extraordinarily difficult to detect, because the experience of receiving it is identical to receiving the real thing. The warmth feels the same. The attention feels the same. The sense of being seen and valued feels the same, until it does not. Today we examine 3 specific forms of weaponized kindness. Each one operates differently. Each one is happening in relationships, workplaces, and families around you right now. 3 forms, 3 different mechanisms. By the end of this video, you will know how to identify all of them, and what to do when you find one. Morand. Part 1. Conditional kindness. What it looks like. The first form of weaponized kindness is the most common. You have almost certainly experienced it. You may be experiencing it right now. Someone in your life is warm toward you, generous, attentive. They remember things you mentioned in passing. They offer help before you ask. They make you feel, consistently, that you are important to them. But you have noticed, perhaps without fully naming it, that this warmth is not constant. There are conditions under which it increases, and conditions under which it withdraws. When you agree with them, they are warm. When you disagree, something cools. Not dramatically. There is no explosion, no confrontation. Just a subtle lowering of temperature, a slightly shorter response, a delay where there was none before, an absence of the warmth you had come to rely on. And without fully understanding why, you find yourself adjusting, editing what you say, choosing your words more carefully, avoiding the topics that seem to trigger the cooling, moving incrementally toward the behaviors and positions that bring the warmth back. This is conditional kindness. and it is one of the most effective behavior modification tools that exists. Wonder, the psychology behind it. What you are experiencing, in behavioral terms, is an intermittent reinforcement schedule. B. F. Skinner, whose work on operant conditioning remains foundational to behavioral psychology, discovered something counterintuitive in the 1930s. He found that the most powerful way to reinforce a behavior is not to reward it every time. It is to reward it unpredictably, intermittently. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, with no clear pattern. He called this a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. And what he found was that behaviors reinforced this way are extraordinarily resistant to extinction. The subject keeps performing the behavior, keeps trying to earn the reward, long after a consistent reward schedule would have lost its power. You see this most visibly in gambling. The slot machine does not pay out every time. It pays out unpredictably. And that unpredictability is precisely what makes it so compelling. The next pull might be the one. The same mechanism operates in relationships where kindness is conditional. You do not know exactly what will bring the warmth back. There is always uncertainty, and that uncertainty keeps you engaged, keeps you trying, keeps you oriented toward the person who controls the reward. What Skinner studied in rats with food pellets, some people deploy consciously and some deploy instinctively in their closest relationships. How to recognize it? The clearest signal of conditional kindness is what psychologists call the approval thermometer. Ask yourself this: do you find yourself monitoring this person's mood before you speak? Do you scan their face, their tone, their energy before deciding what to say and how to say it? Do you feel relief when they are warm toward you? Not just pleasure, but relief, as though you have passed a test you were not sure you would pass. And do you feel a specific anxiety when the warmth withdraws? Not just sadness, but something more urgent. Something that feels like you need to fix it quickly before it gets worse. That anxiety is the signature of conditional kindness. It is the feeling of someone who has been trained, without their knowledge or consent, to perform for approval. Genuine kindness does not produce that anxiety. Genuine care does not require you to pass a continuous, invisible test. If you feel like you are always one wrong word away from losing something important, you are not in a relationship built on genuine care. You are in a conditioning system built on strategic warmth. That was the first form, conditional kindness as behavioral conditioning. The second form is more subtle. Most people mistake it for genuine generosity, sometimes for years. Part 2, gift giving as debt, and Nicest, the gift that is not a gift. The second form of weaponized kindness operates through a mechanism that is ancient, universal, and deeply embedded in human social psychology. It is the gift, not every gift. Most gifts are what they appear to be: an expression of care, a gesture of connection, a token of affection that asks nothing in return. But some gifts are not gifts. They are investments. And the return on investment that the giver expects is not gratitude. It is leverage. Someone does something significant for you. They help you when you are in difficulty. They give you something you needed. They go out of their way in a manner that is visible, memorable, and hard to dismiss. And you feel grateful. That is appropriate. That is a normal human response to receiving genuine help. But then, at some later point, weeks, months, sometimes years later, the gift is referenced. Not explicitly, perhaps, not with a direct demand, but referenced nonetheless. in a moment of conflict, in a situation where you are considering doing something they do not want you to do. And suddenly, the gift has become a debt, and the debt is being called in. The psychology of reciprocity. Robert Cialdini, in his foundational work on the psychology of influence, identified reciprocity as one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior. Human beings have a deeply ingrained need to return what has been given to them. It is cross-cultural. It appears in every society that has been studied, and it operates largely below the level of conscious awareness. When someone gives us something, we feel obligated, not as a rational calculation, but as a felt experience. The obligation is almost physical. We carry it, and we are motivated, strongly motivated, to discharge it, to return to a state of balance, to no longer be in debt. Cialdini documented how comprehensively this mechanism can be exploited. Small gifts create large obligations. Unsolicited favors generate felt debts that the recipient did not choose and may not even want. And the person who gives strategically can create a leverage position over another person that is remarkably durable, because the debt does not disappear until it is repaid, and the person who created it gets to decide when and how repayment is demanded. How to tell a gift from an investment. The distinguishing feature of a genuine gift is that it asks nothing in return. The giver offers it freely, without tracking it, without referencing it, without expecting future compliance. The distinguishing feature of a strategic gift is that it is remembered, carefully, and referenced at the moment of maximum leverage. Watch for this pattern. People who give strategically tend to have an unusual precise memory for what they have done for others, and they tend to surface this information in moments of conflict or negotiation, not in moments of warmth. Ask yourself, does this person give and then let go? Or does this person give and then hold? Is the gift a completion, something offered and then released? Or is the gift an opening move, the beginning of a transaction whose terms will be set later? Machiavelli understood this. In chapter 16 of The Prince, he writes that the appearance of generosity, carefully managed, builds loyalty and obligation at minimal cost. The person who masters strategic gift-giving has learned the lesson Machiavelli articulated 5 centuries ago. The gift is not for you, it is for them. The simple test: when someone does something for you, observe whether they release it over time. Genuine generosity settles into gratitude and then disappears. Strategic debt is heavy. It accumulates, resurfaces, and follows you into situations where it does not belong. If you feel consistently that you owe someone in a way that never resolves, the problem may not be your ingratitude. The problem may be that the debt was designed to never resolve. 2 forms down. The third is the one I promised, happening to most people right now. It involves someone who appears, in every visible way, to be completely on your side. Part 3. Performative support. The ally who is not an ally. The third form of weaponized kindness is the most sophisticated. It requires no direct manipulation. It generates no obvious leverage. It leaves no clear evidence. It is the performance of support. Someone in your life positions themselves as your supporter, your advocate, your person, the one who is always in your corner, always rooting for you, always ready to listen. And they fulfill this role consistently. They are present when you are struggling. They offer encouragement. They validate your experiences. They make you feel, reliably, that someone is watching out for you. But something else is happening underneath the support. The person who presents as your advocate is also quietly gathering, listening not only with empathy but with attention, building a picture of your vulnerabilities, your fears, your aspirations, your relationships, your conflicts, the full architecture of your interior life. Not because they intend to use it immediately, perhaps not because they intend to use it at all, but because information about another person is power over that person. And people who position themselves as confidants are by definition positioned to receive the most sensitive information you possess. The support that monitors, Carl Jung wrote about what he called the persona, the mask a person constructs for public life. And he wrote about how some people become extraordinarily skilled at wearing a persona that is almost entirely constructed of warmth and support. These are the people who seem to have no agenda of their own, who appear to exist, socially, primarily to support others, who make you feel that your concerns are always the priority, your feelings always heard. But Jung also understood that no persona exists without a shadow, that behind every mask is a self with its own needs, its own ambitions, its own fears, and that the more comprehensive the performance of selflessness, the more one should wonder about what it is concealing. Regardless of origin, the effect is the same. You have given someone access to your most private self under the assumption that the access was being held safely, and that assumption may not be warranted. How performative support functions as control. The person who has positioned themselves as your supporter now has two things. They have the information you have shared, your vulnerabilities, your fears, the precise locations of your emotional pressure points, and they have your trust. But there is a second mechanism even more insidious than information gathering. It is the dependency that performative support creates. When someone makes themselves consistently available as your emotional support, you begin naturally to rely on them, to orient toward them in moments of stress, to need their validation in a way you did not before, and that need gives them leverage. Not leverage they necessarily exercise, but leverage they hold. The implicit threat, never stated, perhaps never even consciously recognized, is the withdrawal of support, the removal of the emotional infrastructure you have come to depend on. The test. There is a reliable test for whether the support you are receiving is genuine or performative. Try disagreeing. Not on something trivial, on something real, a decision you have made, a position you hold. A genuine supporter will engage with your disagreement. They may push back, debate, try to change your mind, but they will do it in a way that respects your autonomy. A performative supporter will become slightly less warm, or they will reframe your disagreement as confusion, as stress, as something you will feel differently about with more perspective. Because genuine support includes support for your right to be wrong, to make different choices, to see things differently. Performative support only extends as far as your agreement with the supporter's implicit agenda. 3 forms of weaponized kindness. Now, what you actually do with this. 3 people you already know. It's one what everything we have covered so far has been theoretical. Mechanisms, frameworks, psychological models. Now I want to bring it closer, because the 3 forms of weaponized kindness we have examined do not exist in academic papers. They exist in specific people, in specific relationships, in situations that most of you have experienced or are experiencing right now. I'm going to describe 3 people. I'm not going to give them names. I do not need to. Because the moment I describe them, you will recognize someone. And that recognition, that specific, slightly uncomfortable feeling of knowing exactly who I am talking about, is the beginning of the clarity we have been building toward. The first person, the one whose approval you work for, you know this person. They have never done anything dramatically wrong. There has been no betrayal you can point to, no moment of obvious cruelty, nothing that would justify the way you feel around them. And yet, before every conversation with them, you prepare. You think about what you will say and how you will say it. You anticipate their reactions and pre-adjust your words to avoid the ones that seem to land badly. After conversations with them, you debrief. You replay what was said. You identify the moments where the temperature shifted, where the warmth increased or decreased, and you catalogue them for next time. You have become, without anyone asking you to, a student of this person's approval system. You understand it with a precision you have never consciously developed. You know what earns warmth and what withdraws it. You have learned the rules of a game nobody told you was being played. This is not a character flaw. This is not weakness. This is the predictable result of being in sustained contact with someone who has, consciously or not, built a system in which their warmth is contingent on your behavior. The test is simple. Ask yourself, when this person is warm toward me, do I feel joy or do I feel relief? Joy says, I'm receiving something freely given. Relief says, I have passed the test, again. The difference between those 2 experiences is the entire distance between a genuine relationship and a conditioning system. The second person, die Warmth, the one whose generosity follows you. This person has done a lot for you. You know it, they know it, and somehow, without ever being explicitly told, you know it is not over. They helped you when you needed it. The help was real. The difficulty was real. The relief you felt was genuine. You were grateful, and you showed it, and they seemed to receive that gratitude gracefully. But somewhere in the months and years that followed, you began to notice something. The help appears in conversation. Not constantly, not aggressively, but reliably. In moments where your interests and theirs diverge. In situations where you are considering a direction they do not prefer. In arguments framed as context, offered as evidence of a relationship whose balance you should feel before making your next move. You cannot quite call it manipulation. The facts are accurate. They did help you. You are grateful. There is no lie in anything they have said. But there is something else, a pattern, a consistency in when the past appears that is too precise to be accidental. Genuine generosity does not have a consistent pattern of appearing when someone's autonomy is at stake. That specificity, the arrival of past kindness precisely at the moment of your independence, is the signature of strategic gift-giving. The question is not whether they helped you. The question is whether the help was ever actually completed, or whether it remains, deliberately, unresolved. A permanent entry in a ledger you did not know you were signing. The third person, the one who is always there, this person is perhaps the most difficult to see clearly, because they have done nothing wrong that you can identify. In fact, they have done everything right. They listen consistently. They remember what you share. They show up when things are difficult. They validate your experiences without immediately offering solutions. They make you feel, perhaps more than anyone else in your life, genuinely heard. And you have shared things with them, things you have not shared with many people. Fears, failures, the parts of yourself that feel most fragile. You shared them because this person created a space that felt genuinely safe. The question that dark psychology raises, not to be paranoid but to be precise, is what happens to that information? Not all of it, perhaps none of it. Most people who listen well are simply people who listen well. The capacity for genuine support is real and common and important. But there is a subset, and you may know someone in this subset, for whom the listening is not just an act of care. It is also an act of acquisition, a building of a map, a slow accumulation of the architecture of your inner life, held not just because they care about you, but because knowing you thoroughly is a form of power. The test is not whether they have used what you shared. The test is what happens when you disagree with them, when you withdraw, when you assert something they do not want to hear. Does the support remain? Or does it become, suddenly, slightly conditional? Does the warmth hold? Or does it cool? Just enough, just precisely enough, to remind you of what you would be losing if you push further. That cooling, that is the tell. Why these three people are hard to see clearly. I want to address something directly. Everything I have just described exists on a spectrum. The person whose approval you work for may simply have high standards and a reserved manner. The person whose generosity follows you may simply have a good memory and a habit of referencing shared history. The person who is always there may simply be someone who cares deeply and takes relationships seriously. The mechanisms I have described can be present in mild, barely consequential forms, or they can be present in severe, genuinely damaging forms. Most human behavior exists in the complicated middle. What dark psychology offers is not a lens for labeling people. It is a lens for understanding dynamics, for seeing clearly what is actually happening in a relationship. Not what you want to be happening, not what feels comfortable to believe, but what the pattern of behavior observed over time actually reveals. You do not need to conclude that someone is malicious to recognize that the dynamic between you is costing you something. People can create conditioning systems without intending to. People can use past generosity as leverage without fully knowing that is what they are doing. People can make their support conditional without ever consciously deciding to. Intention matters for moral judgment. It does not matter for your own well-being. What matters for your well-being is whether the dynamic is working for you or against you, whether you are growing more yourself in this relationship or less, whether you feel, over time, more free or more managed. Those questions do not require you to assign blame. They only require you to look clearly. You now have the framework. You have the examples. The last thing you need is what to do with it. Actionable conclusion. I want to be precise here because there is a real danger in this kind of content. The danger is cynicism. The danger is that you walk away with a framework that makes every act of kindness suspicious, every gift a potential manipulation, every supporter a potential surveiller. That would be a misreading, and it would cost you something real: the genuine connections, the actual generosity, the true support that matters enormously to a meaningful life. So here are 3 specific tools, not a worldview, specific tools for specific situations. Tool 1. The consistency check. For 30 days, observe whether the warmth you receive from a person tracks with your behavior toward them. Does it increase when you agree, decrease when you push back? You are looking for a directional correlation between your compliance and their kindness. If you find one consistently, you have found something worth examining. Forward. Tool 2. The release test. When someone does something for you, observe whether they release it. Genuine generosity, once given, tends to be let go. Strategic generosity is held. It accumulates and resurfaces precisely when your autonomy is at stake. Tool 3. The disagreement test. Lens. Disagree. Clearly, calmly, on something real. Genuine care survives disagreement. It may include debate and friction, but it does not withdraw. It does not reframe your autonomy as a problem. The response to your disagreement, not the content, but the emotional quality of it, will tell you more about the nature of the kindness you have been receiving than any other single observation you can make. Kindness is not the enemy. It is one of the most important things human beings can offer each other, the material out of which genuine relationships are built. What we examine today is not kindness. It is the mask that kindness makes available to people who understand how powerfully it works on human psychology. The goal is not to become someone who receives kindness with suspicion. The goal is to become someone who can tell the difference between warmth that is offered freely and warmth that is deployed strategically, between a gift that is given and a debt that is created, between support that holds you and support that holds you in place. Once the mechanism is visible, it loses most of its power over you. That is what dark psychology is for. Not to make you harder, not to make you more manipulative, but to make you harder to manipulate. That is all for today.